It started with the sound of metal crunching against brick, the kind of noise that makes your heart drop before you even look outside. Karen's daughter had somehow managed to drive her shiny new Jeep straight through my front wall, shattering not just the bricks, but the calm of our quiet neighborhood. I thought it was an accident, something we'd handle like reasonable adults. But within days, I found myself facing a lawsuit from them. They claimed I was responsible for unsafe property conditions. That's when I realized this wasn't about a crash. It was about control. And Karen had picked the wrong neighbor to play games with. What she didn't know is, I never lose a fight that's on my own property before the crash. My neighborhood felt like one of those picture-perfect communities you see on real estate brochures. Clean sidewalks, trimmed hedges, and the faint hum of sprinklers at sunset. Everyone waved when they passed by, even if the smiles didn't always reach their eyes. I'd lived there for over a decade. Long enough to see the new families move in, the HOA swap leadership twice, and the quiet tension that lived just beneath all that suburban calm. My home sat at the corner of the cul-de-sac, a modest but well-kept brick house with a short retaining wall lining the driveway. That wall, the one I'd built years ago to stop rainwater from spilling into my yard, would later become the center of a war one never saw coming. Karen moved in 2 houses, down about a year before everything happened. She wasn't terrible at first, overly chatty maybe. The kind of neighbor who always had something to suggest. She'd make little comments about how my hedges were a bit too wild for HOA standards or how my mailbox didn't quite match the neighborhood's theme. It was harmless enough. Until her daughter showed up. Her daughter, Chelsea, was in her early 20s, loud, entitled, and constantly speeding through our narrow street in a lifted white Jeep. Most neighbors grumbled, but said nothing. I figured it wasn't my problem. After all, I'd dealt with enough HOA nonsense in the past, the kind that fines you for leaving your trash bin out for 5 extra minutes. I wasn't about to start another argument over a spoiled adult who couldn't follow basic driving etiquette. Still, couldn't help but notice the pattern. Karen's daughter parked wherever she pleased, blocking driveways, double parking near mailboxes, even once bumping into someone's decorative garden light. Each time, Karen brushed it off with that dismissive tone. Only people with power or think they have power can pull off. Oh, Chelsea's just learning, she'd laugh. But everyone knew she was just avoiding accountability. What I didn't realize then was how deep Karen's influence ran in our HOA board. She wasn't just a neighbor with opinions. She was the kind of person who liked to remind others that her word carried weight. I'd seen her intimidate the landscaper once, insisting her yard should be done first because she was technically the head of the beautification committee. It was a small thing, but it said everything. Life went on like that for months, small annoyances buried under the surface. I spent most of my time tending to my yard, fixing small projects, and enjoying the quiet corner lot that I worked hard to maintain. My wall stood strong, marking the edge of my property, something I built with my own hands and a lot of patience. It wasn't fancy, just solid, clean, and functional. Looking back, I see the signs: Karen's sideways glances when she walked past, Chelsea's habit of parking closer and closer to my property line, the quiet gossip during HOA meetings about certain homeowners who don't cooperate. It all felt trivial then, petty even, until one evening, the night of the crash. The day had been calm, nothing unusual. I remember trimming a few branches earlier that morning, planning to paint the mailbox that weekend. The sun dipped low, casting that golden glow across the street. And then that sound. A violent, echoing crunch, my normal life. My peaceful street, and the fragile illusion of civility in our HOA, all shattered in a single K. All shattered in a single, screeching moment of impact. The moment I heard the crash, I ran outside, heart pounding, half expecting to see a fender bender or maybe a toppled trash can. Instead, my worst nightmare stood in front of me. Chelsea's white Jeep was wedged halfway into my retaining wall. Bricks scattered across the driveway, dust hanging thick in the air. She was standing outside the vehicle, phone already in hand, yelling into it like I had caused the accident. Her mother, Karen, came sprinting down the street moments later, robe flapping, eyes darting between her daughter and my ruined wall. And the look she gave me, not one of apology or embarrassment, but accusation. "Your wall shouldn't even be that close to the street," she hissed. I was stunned. The wall had been approved years ago by the HOA itself, long before Karen ever joined the board. But that didn't stop her. Within an hour, she was marching around with her phone, taking photos, muttering about liability and unsafe property modifications. That night, as I swept up the debris, I tried to shake off the anger. Accidents happen. Maybe she'd apologize in the morning. Maybe the HOA would do the right thing for once. But deep down, I already knew how this would go. The next day, a notice appeared on my door. From the HOA, it accused me of improper property, construction, and potential hazards to community safety. They wanted the wall removed within 30 days, or I'd face fines and possible legal action. My jaw dropped. The wall that her daughter destroyed was now somehow my fault. I went straight to the HOA office, a small building near the entrance of the community. It always smelled faintly of coffee and power trips. Karen was already there, sitting smugly beside the HOA president, pretending to be calm and reasonable. "I'm sorry about the damage," she said, in that syrupy tone people use when they're lying through their teeth. "But this wall wasn't compliant with our updated boundary standards. Chelsea couldn't have known it was built too close to the road." I pulled out my paperwork, the original approval signed years ago. "This wall has been compliant since day one. I have permits and HOA approval from 2013. This isn't on me." Her smirk didn't fade. If anything, it grew. The HOA president, a man who'd once fined me for having my trash can visible for over 8 minutes past pickup, cleared his throat. "Well, the rules may have changed since then. It's best to remove the wall to avoid further issues." I walked out before I said something I'd regret. Over the next few weeks, it only got worse. I started receiving anonymous complaints, lawn too long, mailbox too faded, driveway stains. Every week, another letter, another fine. It was clear this wasn't random. Karen was using her influence to bleed me dry. Meanwhile, Chelsea strutted around the neighborhood like nothing happened, Jeep repaired, blasting music, waving at the same people she'd nearly run off the road. Every time I saw that vehicle, anger churned in my chest. One night, I found her parked again near my property, this time even closer to what was left of my wall. I calmly asked her to move, reminding her she'd already caused enough damage. She rolled her eyes and said, "You shouldn't have built it there in the first place." That was it, the confirmation I needed. I installed security cameras the next morning, pointing directly at the driveway and street. Within days, Karen filed a complaint about privacy violations and demanded the HOA force me to remove them. It was absurd. I wasn't filming her home, just my own property line. But the HOA sided with her again. They sent a letter stating that all security systems must comply with HOA privacy standards, threatening daily fines until I removed them. I refused. By now, I'd started keeping meticulous records, every email, every photo, every violation letter. I could feel something bigger building beneath all this petty nonsense. Karen wasn't just being difficult. She was trying to create a narrative, one that painted me as the unreasonable neighbor. Then came the breaking point. A few weeks after the crash, I received a formal notice of legal action. Karen and Chelsea were claiming I was responsible for the Jeep's damage and for creating a hazardous structure on community property. They were suing me for nearly $7,000. I couldn't believe it. The woman whose daughter destroyed my wall was now suing me and doing it through the same HOA that was supposed to protect homeowners. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by papers, photos, and HOA documents. Every word I read, every email from Karen, dripping with passive aggression, only fueled the fire inside me. That's when I decided I wouldn't just defend myself, I'd expose everything. The next day, I hired an independent property inspector and a lawyer who specialized in HOA abuse cases. The inspector confirmed that my wall was entirely compliant with all historical HOA and city building codes. He even noted that the wall had likely prevented the Jeep from hitting my house, meaning Chelsea's reckless driving could have caused much worse damage. My lawyer sent a cease and desist letter to both Karen and the HOA board, demanding they retract their false claims and drop the fines. Within 24 hours, the HOA called an emergency meeting. It was chaos. Karen arrived dressed to the nines, pretending to be composed, but the tension in the room was electric. Half the board looked uncomfortable. The other half stared at me like I was the problem. My lawyer calmly presented the evidence, photos, inspection reports, approval letters, and even security footage of Chelsea's Jeep barreling down the street seconds before the crash. The footage silenced the room. Karen tried to speak, tried to spin the story, claiming I provoked her daughter with unsafe landscaping. But the evidence was airtight. My wall had been within every boundary, every rule, and every permit since the day it was built. And then came the twist. My lawyer revealed something that made the room go completely still. The HOA's supposed updated rules, the ones they claimed made my wall non-compliant, had never been officially approved by the city or filed with the county. They were drafts, unratified, meaning the fines, the letters. And every single action Karen pushed through were illegal. Karen's face turned pale. The HOA president began fumbling through papers, muttering something about administrative miscommunication. But it was too late. I had them by the end of that meeting. The lawsuit was withdrawn. The HOA was forced to issue a written apology and refund every fine I'd paid over the last month. But Karen, she wasn't done yet. She left the meeting in silence, her daughter close behind, glaring at me with that same smug defiance. I knew this wasn't over. Not yet, because people like Karen don't accept defeat. They plot comebacks. And as I stood outside that night, staring at the half-repaired wall under the streetlights, I couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was brewing, something that would push this neighborhood, feud to its breaking point, and finally expose who really ran this community, top of form, bottom of form. The day of the HOA hearing felt like walking into enemy territory. The community clubhouse, normally a cheerful place for bake sales and holiday gatherings, had been transformed into a battlefield. Folding chairs lined up in neat rows, a long oak table at the front for the board, and a tense hum in the air that even the soft buzz of the ceiling fan couldn't drown out. Word had spread fast. Nearly half the neighborhood showed up, whispering behind cups of coffee, eager to watch the spectacle. After all, it wasn't every day that Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, was forced to defend herself in public. I took my seat near the front, my lawyer beside me, briefcase filled with every document, photo and video we had. Across the room, Karen sat stiffly, her daughter Chelsea glued to her phone, occasionally sneaking smug glances at me. Karen's posture screamed confidence, but the way her fingers fidgeted with her pen told a different story. The HOA president cleared his throat, trying to look authoritative. We're here today to address the matter involving property damage, compliance disputes, and claims filed by both parties, he began. His voice wavered slightly. He knew this wasn't going to be routine. Karen was the first to speak. She launched into her speech like she was performing for an audience, voice dripping with self-righteousness. First of all, she began, Let me make it clear that this isn't personal. I've always acted in the best interest of our community. The wall in question was too close to the public street, and it presented a safety hazard that unfortunately caused my daughter's accident. Her tone was so polished, so rehearsed that for a second you might have believed her if you didn't know the truth. She continued, "We have multiple neighbors who expressed concern about this wall long before the incident. It obstructed visibility and was built using materials inconsistent with community standards." That was a lie. A blatant, bold-faced lie. I looked around the room. A few neighbors nodded. Most looked confused. Some whispered. Karen was doing what she did best, bending the narrative until it suited her. Then the president turned to me. "You'll have a chance to respond, Mr. Carter." I stood slowly, feeling every pair of eyes on me. My lawyer gave a subtle nod. "Let's start with facts," I said, my voice steady. "This wall was built in 2013. It was approved by the HOA. This HOA under official permits filed with the county. It's not on community property. It's not a hazard. It's completely compliant. And the only reason we're all sitting here is because Karen refuses to accept responsibility for her daughter's reckless driving." A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. Karen's smile twitched. "Objection," she started. Before realizing this wasn't a courtroom, I reached into the folder and held up the inspection report. "This is from a licensed property inspector. The structure met every safety requirement. The only unsafe action was Chelsea driving 38 miles per hour in a 20 zone. Gasps. The kind that tell you the crowd's mood just shifted. Karen tried to speak again, but my lawyer cut her off by playing the footage security camera video of the white Jeep barreling down the street before it smashed into my wall. The sound of the impact echoed through the room, followed by stunned silence. For a moment, all you could hear was the whir of the ceiling fan and the faint hum of someone's phone. It's vibrating. Karen's face turned crimson. Chelsea's hands froze on her lap. The HOA president cleared his throat again, visibly sweating now. "Is that from your property's security system?" "Yes," I said. "The same cameras the HOA fined me for installing at Karen's request." You could practically feel the collective realization hit the room. Karen had tried to destroy evidence by getting those cameras removed, but it wasn't over. My lawyer leaned forward. "We also have documentation showing that the updated boundary standards Karen cited in her complaint were never ratified. The HOA acted on unapproved invalid rules at her direction." The president's eyes widened. "What?" The lawyer continued, sliding papers across the table. "These are the official filings with the county. No record exists of those rule changes ever being approved or distributed, meaning every violation notice, every fine, every complaint Mr. Carter received was illegitimate." A collective murmur grew into an audible buzz. Karen tried to interject, but her voice cracked. That's not possible." I submitted. "Submitted what?" I asked, unable to hold back. "Fake rules. Personal vendettas dressed up as policy." For the first time, Karen's mask slipped. Her voice rose, shrill and desperate. "You think you can just waltz in here and make a fool of me? I built this community." The room went silent again. The arrogance in her voice echoed off the walls. My lawyer calmly slid one final document across the table. A printed email chain between Karen and the HOA president. The subject line, "Let's make sure he pays for this." Her face drained of color. You could hear the whispers now, spreading like wildfire across the room. Even her allies on the board looked at her like they'd just realized who she really was. The HOA president tried to stammer out a defense, but the damage was done. This email, it's not what it looks like," he said weakly. "Oh, it's exactly what it looks like," my lawyer replied. Conspiracy to misuse HOA authority for personal retaliation. That's a violation of your own bylaws and state property law. The entire room erupted. Some gasped, others muttered in disbelief. A few stood up to leave, shaking their heads. Karen slammed her hand on the table. This is ridiculous. You're twisting everything. He set us up. I stayed quiet, just watching her unravel. Years of intimidation, bullying, and manipulation all crumbling in front of her own audience. The HOA president finally turned to her. Karen, I think it's best if you step outside. But she refused. She stood, trembling with rage, pointing at me. You'll regret this. You'll see. You think this is over? Her voice cracked again, louder this time, part fury, part panic. Then she stormed out, dragging Chelsea behind her, leaving behind a stunned silence that felt almost sacred. When the door slammed shut, the president exhaled shakily. Effective immediately, he said. The board will be voting to remove Mrs. Saunders from her position pending investigation. And Mr. Carter, the HOA, will cover the full cost of your wall repairs and rescind all fines. A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. Karen's smile twitched. Objection, she started. Before realizing this wasn't a courtroom, I reached into the folder and held up the inspection report. This is from a licensed property inspector. The structure met every safety requirement. The only unsafe action was Chelsea driving 38 miles per hour in a 20 zone. Gasps. The kind that tell you the crowd's mood just shifted. Karen tried to speak again, but my lawyer cut her off by playing the footage security camera video of the white Jeep barreling down the street before it smashed into my wall. The sound of the impact echoed through the room, followed by stunned silence. For a moment, all you could hear was the whir of the ceiling fan and the faint hum of someone's phone. Vibrating, Karen's face turned crimson. Chelsea's hands froze on her lap. The HOA president cleared his throat again, visibly sweating now. Is that from your property's security system? Yes, I said. The same cameras the HOA fined me for installing at Karen's request. You could practically feel the collective realization hit the room. Karen had tried to destroy evidence by getting those cameras removed, but it wasn't over. My lawyer leaned forward. We also have documentation showing that the updated boundary standards Karen cited in her complaint were never ratified. The HOA acted on unapproved invalid rules at her direction. The president's eyes widened. What? The lawyer continued, sliding papers across the table. These are the official filings with the county. No record exists of those rule changes ever being approved or distributed. Meaning, every violation notice, every fine, every complaint Mr. Carter received was illegitimate. A collective murmur grew into an audible buzz. Karen tried to interject, but her voice cracked. That's not possible. I submitted what? I asked, unable to hold back. Fake rules. Personal vendettas dressed up as policy. For the first time, Karen's mask slipped. Her voice rose, shrill and desperate. You think you can just waltz in here and make a fool of me? I built this community. The room went silent again. The arrogance in her voice echoed off the walls. My lawyer calmly slid one final document across the table. A printed email chain between Karen and the HOA president. The subject line, "Let's make sure he pays for this." Her face drained of color. You could hear the whispers now, spreading like wildfire across the room. Even her allies on the board looked at her like they'd just realized who she really was. The HOA president tried to stammer out a defense, but the damage was done. This email, it's not what it looks like, he said weakly. Oh, it's exactly what it looks like, my lawyer replied. Conspiracy to misuse HOA authority for personal retaliation. That's a violation of your own bylaws and state property law." The entire room erupted. Some gasped, others muttered in disbelief. A few stood up to leave, shaking their heads. Karen slammed her hand on the table. "This is ridiculous. You're twisting everything. He set us up." I stayed quiet, just watching her unravel. Years of intimidation, bullying, and manipulation, all crumbling in front of her own audience. The HOA president finally turned to her. "Karen, I think it's best if you step outside," but she refused. She stood, trembling with rage, pointing at me. "You'll regret this. You'll see." "You think this is over?" Her voice cracked again, louder this time, part fury, part panic. Then she stormed out, dragging Chelsea behind her, leaving behind a stunned silence that felt almost sacred. When the door slammed shut, the president exhaled shakily. "Effective immediately," he said. "The board will be voting to remove Mrs. Saunders from her position pending investigation. And, Mr. Carter, the HOA will cover the full cost of your wall repairs and rescind all fines." It should have felt like victory, and it did, mostly. But there was still something unsettling about how far Karen had gone. How easily she'd twisted the system. How many others she'd probably bullied into silence before me as I stepped outside. The late afternoon sun painted the neighborhood in warm orange light. It was the same peaceful street I'd loved when I moved in. Yet it felt different now, exposed. Like the illusion of order and fairness had finally cracked across the cul-de-sac. I spotted Karen's SUV pulling away fast, windows tinted, engine growling. Chelsea sat in the passenger seat, arms crossed, eyes fixed ahead. I thought that was the last I'd see of them. But just as I turned back toward my house, my lawyer's phone buzzed. He frowned, looked at the screen, then at me. "You might want to see this." He showed me a local news alert. Homeowners file lawsuit against HOA president for abuse of power. Leaked emails suggest years of misconduct. Karen's name wasn't just in my file anymore. It was in the public record, and as the sun dipped below the horizon, I realized this wasn't just about my wall. It was about every homeowner who'd ever been silenced by people like her. I stood there, watching the neighborhood lights flicker on, feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and satisfaction. Because while Karen might have thought she could control everything, she'd just lost the one thing she valued most: her reputation. Still, deep down, I knew her kind didn't fade quietly. And as I locked my front door that night, I couldn't shake the thought, what would Karen do next, now that she had nothing left to lose? The weeks after the hearing felt almost surreal. For the first time in months, I could step outside my front door without the constant weight of hostility pressing on my shoulders. The whispers that once followed me in the cul-de-sac were gone. Now, people waved. Some even stopped to chat. It was like the entire neighborhood had exhaled after holding its breath for far too long. The wall was repaired, quickly, at the HOA's expense, as promised, and the workers even went above and beyond, reinforcing the structure and repainting the exterior to match the house perfectly. I remember standing there, watching the fresh paint dry, thinking how ironic it was that something meant to divide had now become a symbol of victory. Karen, on the other hand, had vanished from the community's social circles. After the board voted to suspend her indefinitely, she tried to appeal. But the mounting pressure from residents and the ongoing county investigation made her position untenable. Within a few weeks, she sold her house quietly, without a word to anyone. The for sale sign appeared one morning, and by sunset, a moving truck was already parked in her driveway. Her daughter, Chelsea, left not long after. The Jeep, once polished and proudly displayed in their driveway, now sat dented and rusting by the curb. Every time I passed it, I couldn't help but think of that night, the crash, the chaos, and everything it set in motion. But the aftermath wasn't all about revenge or satisfaction. It was about clarity, about seeing how fragile power can be when it's built on intimidation and deceit. A month later, the HOA held its first community-wide meeting under new leadership. The difference was night and day. Gone were the stiff, performative gatherings filled with condescension and fear. Instead, there was open discussion, transparency, and most surprisingly, laughter. When they invited me to speak, I didn't plan on saying much. But as I looked around the room, seeing the relief and gratitude on people's faces, I realized how deep Karen's control had run. "I'm not here to dwell on the past," I began, "but I think we all learned something important from what happened. An HOA isn't supposed to rule over homeowners. It's supposed to serve them. We live here. We built this community. And that means no one, not me, not anyone, should be afraid to stand up for what's right." Applause broke out. It wasn't thunderous, but it was genuine, and that was enough. In the weeks that followed, I started getting visits from neighbors I barely knew before. Some came to thank me for standing up. Others came to share their own stories, times when Karen or the old board had threatened them with fines for small things. A garden too large. A fence painted the wrong shade. A holiday decoration left up too long. Each story carried the same emotion, quiet. Frustration that had never been given a voice until now. One neighbor, an elderly woman named Mrs. Turner, told me through tears how Karen once threatened to have her dog removed because it barked too much. The dog had passed away not long after. And she said she'd always felt too powerless to fight back. That hit harder than I expected. It reminded me that this was never just about one wall or one crash. It was about a system that allowed petty authority to grow unchecked until it hurt real people. As for the legal case, the county investigation moved faster than anyone predicted. Once the leaked emails hit the news, other homeowners came forward with their own complaints. The HOA president resigned quietly, citing personal reasons, though everyone knew the truth. The county issued formal reprimands and fines for procedural violations and misuse of technology. Karen wasn't named directly in the final report, but her fingerprints were everywhere. She avoided major legal consequences, but her reputation, the one she'd spent years building, was irreparably destroyed. And yet, even after all that, part of me couldn't help but wonder if she learned anything from it. People like Karen don't often reflect. They just relocate their chaos somewhere new. Still, justice, in its own imperfect way, had been served. Months passed. The seasons changed. My wall stood tall and unscathed, the paint bright and clean under the morning light. I planted flowers along the base, blue and yellow perennials that added color where once there was only tension. It became something I took quiet pride in, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that peace is something worth fighting for. Then one afternoon, I received a letter in the mail. No return address, just my name neatly written in careful script. Inside was a single page. It was from Chelsea, she wrote. "I wanted to apologize for what happened. My mom let her pride get in the way, and I followed her lead when I shouldn't have. You didn't deserve what we did to you. I've been ordered by the court to pay part of the damages. And I just wanted you to know, I'm doing it, and I'm trying to make things right." For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the letter. It wasn't forgiveness I felt. Not yet, but something close to understanding. Maybe even closure. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my desk drawer. Then I looked out the window toward the repaired wall. The one that started it all. It stood quietly in the sun, as if it had never been broken. Life in the neighborhood eventually settled into something resembling normal. New families moved in. Kids played on the sidewalks again. The HOA rebuilt itself under new bylaws, ones that included stricter limits on board authority and clearer transparency rules. I helped write those rules not out of spite, but because I wanted to make sure no one else would ever have to go through what I did. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, I'd walk past the spot where Karen's old house stood. The new owners, a young couple, kept it simple and bright, with a small flower garden and wind chimes that tinkled softly in the breeze. There was no trace of the tension that had once poisoned that corner of the street. But every now and then, when the wind caught those chimes just right, I'd think back to the chaos that used to fill this place, the shouting, the threats, the lies, and I'd feel grateful it was finally gone. And that's the thing about control. People like Karen believe it's permanent. They think they can twist the rules, bully the quiet ones, and bend the truth until it fits their version of order. But the truth doesn't stay buried forever. Eventually, it breaks through just like that wall did. If there's one lesson this entire ordeal taught me, it's that standing up for yourself doesn't always mean fighting back harder. Sometimes it just means refusing to be intimidated, refusing to let lies define you, because in the end, it's the people who build walls out of arrogance eventually watch them collapse under their own weight. And as for me, I still live here. Same house, same street, same wall. Only now it stands not as a reminder of conflict, but of resilience. Sometimes I catch neighbors slowing down as they pass by, looking at the wall, probably remembering what happened. Some nod, some smile, and sometimes one of them will stop to say, "You really handled that whole thing well." I always just smile back, because they'll never really know the nights I spent wondering if I'd gone too far, or if standing up to her was worth it. But deep down, I know it was, because the moment I stopped letting fear dictate how I lived in my own home, that's when I finally took my peace back. And that, not the victory, not the headlines, not even the apology letter, was the real ending to it all. A quiet house, a strong wall, and a neighborhood that finally remembered how to breathe again.